Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rocha Lima.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast is brought to you by Holland Harnham Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Harnham Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. I'm joined today by Sandra Porter. Sandra is a franchisee of the HR Dept, a firm providing outsourced HR support to local businesses. Before starting her own business, Sandra had a very successful career journey in the corporate world, starting as a graduate trainee in a recruitment business and ultimately becoming the HR director at Starbucks. What's unique about Sandra is how she draws on her experience to provide personal, practical, and pragmatic HR and employment law advice to small and medium-sized businesses. In this conversation, Sandra shares some great insights into career planning, improving the customer experience, strengths-based recruitment, reducing staff turnover, and more. So whether you're interested in knowing more about what HR is, or would like to hear from an HR expert on things you can implement in your business straight away, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Welcome, Sandra Porter, to the Inside Kingston podcast. I'm really excited about this conversation because I think there are many facets of the HR world which you're very experienced in, and actually a lot of our local businesses could learn a lot from. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time a little bit, if that's okay. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in West London.
West London, okay. Yep. And what did you study at university?
Psychology.
Psychology,
yeah.
Okay. And from university, how did you get into HR?
I fell into it by accident, as I'm sure is the case for many.
For a lot of business owners, yes.
When I left university, I had my psychology degree, which opened many doors and didn't really close any, which is kind of helpful, but keeps your options very open, which can still mean you feel quite lost, actually, I think. I'd really enjoyed occupational psychology, but just by chance, a friend of a friend really was looking for a graduate to go and help in a recruitment business. And that recruitment business was run by Daniel Craig's dad.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was sitting in the office and Daniel Craig used to come to the office and he used to swagger in and I used to think, God, who do you think you are? And then he turned out to be James Bond. So, hey.
Absolutely.
I did that for quite a while. So I was working in executive search and then actually went to start working for one of my clients, which was the Bank of Scotland. And the day I was starting there, in theory, to crunch some numbers, the phone was ringing. And I thought, someone going to answer that phone. And they said, do you mind just answering that phone? And the HR officer had been dismissed that day.
Wow.
And that was it. I was in.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit about your career journey so far, because obviously from university to a stint in recruitment to then joining HBOS, which is now a company everybody recognises, of course, but your career journey in the corporate world, would you mind describing that a little bit to us? Because I think that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I was quite fortunate that the first role that I took when I was it was Capital Bank of Scotland, became HBOS. So we went through a number of changes in the 4 years I was there. There were many kind of HR managers there at the time that had a specific business area. So they looked after just business banking or whatever. I actually kind of ended up taking over all the bits that nobody else was looking after.
Okay.
So within my remit, I had HGV depots. I had call centres. I had field salespeople.
Oh, wow.
I had all manner of things, which was quite challenging because every audience was completely different, needed completely different things, had a different mindset about what HR was there for. But it was great because it was a really good way to learn to be very adaptable and be able to understand your customers' needs and help them.
From there to O2?
So from there, I worked my way up to senior HR partner whilst I was at HBOS. And then I was doing that in Chester and I moved back down south for personal reasons. And so I was asked to go and be head of HR for O2. At that time, they didn't have any stores at all.
Wow.
They were just a brand, not just a brand. They were a brilliant brand, but they didn't have any retail footprint and they were wanting to. So I joined them to help expand their retail footprint.
Oh, wow.
I did that, and then we bought The Link, which was a chain of stores similar to Carphone. We bought them, and then so I helped with the integration of those guys, and then ended up looking after technology, finance, and engineering.
Wow.
So I did retail for a good couple of years, and then I did finance, technology, engineering, which are hugely unionised, are quite male dominated, and therefore there were a number of challenges in terms of negotiating with unions on pay reviews and things like that, which was which was brilliant experience. And then I was headhunted to go to Starbucks as their HR director. So then I sat on the board of Starbucks for 4 years and help them grow, help them scale down, change the business format, all kinds. And
Starbucks, of course, is a unique brand because people are aware of not only what they do as a company, especially the initiatives that they do in America with healthcare and incentivizing college education amongst the baristas. So I want to have a chat with you about your time at Starbucks in a second. But before I do, for the benefit of our listeners, could you sum up today what you see the role of the HR department being in an organization?
I think there's an opportunity for HR people to try and move from the day-to-day administration of things like contracts and policies, which is necessary, but to being really decent business advisors with a people perspective. And so I think some of the best compliments I could get from a client is where business owners say to me, I want to grow, I don't know how to do it. Never thought of that. Love that. When people say, I hadn't thought of that as an option, whether it's to sort out a particular people issue or whether it's thinking about how they can scale up, how they can grow, how they can do that with absolute cost efficiency and things. The thing I get out of bed for on a Monday morning is clients to say, oh God, I'm glad I found you.
That's great.
and that is brilliant for us.
Well, when we first met, Sandra, and this was at a networking event through the local chambers of commerce, you mentioned to me a project that you set up in Starbucks, and this was the first ever NVQ in customer services for baristas.
Yes.
Could you tell me what that project was about, but then also describe to me a bit about what Starbucks got out of that, that perhaps they didn't think about day one?
Yeah. So as you'd find with many kind of big chain stores, if you like, across the UK, they're often seen as just a place for somebody to go and earn enough pennies for their beers on a Friday night. And that's great. And that works for many. But what we were finding was that there was two halves of Starbucks. There was the half of the population that were green through and through. Yeah, they loved their green apron. They'd been there most of their working life and they were very, very loyal. And the other half were very transitionary. So they would come in, they'd do their work. They might then go to a different Starbucks whilst they're at university, come back to their home, work at different Starbucks. And that was really good. It made the attrition look high, but actually that wasn't a problem. We found that actually the experience that people could get from working in a Starbucks store was actually very fundamental to understanding how a small business operates.
Okay.
Because they ran, it was a small business.
Indeed.
They were in charge of developing their own businesses, developing their own partnerships with other businesses. How could they bring business customers in? How could they bring in kind of the school leavers or whatever? And there were lots and lots of skills that you would start learning as a barista in terms of customer experience, standards, food safety, all that kinds of things that would then progress as a supervisor, as a assistant manager, as a manager. And we really wanted to be able to formalise that.
Okay.
For two perspectives. One, that they acknowledged that what they were learning were really core business skills, that were genuine learning opportunities. It wasn't just, oh, I'm just a barista. That's rubbish. That's just a really important job. And there was a skill in doing it well. I should know. I used to have to go into store usually once a year, if not twice a year, to help out at busy times. I was useless. Because it's really hard.
I bet, yeah.
It's really challenging when you've got a queue of 20 people with these very, very personalised orders. Trying to do that and keep a smile on your face. The organisation is incredible. But also from a business point of view, it was really important to help people feel like they were learning, recognising their progress and being able to formalise which roles did which jobs so that there was a genuine career path.
Well, on that career path side of things, that's what I found really interesting about discussing this further with you, was that it actually helped with staff retention, right?
Yeah, hugely.
So with that in mind, what are some of the tips you could give to local small and medium-sized businesses when they think about their own staff retention strategy?
I think sometimes people that are running smaller businesses think that they're never going to be able to compete. They're never going to be able to compete with a really good career plan from a big corporate, say. And I get that. You may be limited, that if you only have 20 roles, how far can people go? But it's short-sighted, I think, to just think we can't compete and therefore we're only ever going to be able to retain people for 2 years. because that is not the case. I think what people want to feel is that you are committed to helping them grow. And it just means you need to be a bit more open-minded and creative about how you do it. The most important thing, I think, is being able to sit down with team members and say, right, where do you want your career to grow? How can we do as much of that here as possible? And then feeling like they're being invested in. Something that's just literally sitting down, having a conversation, formalising it, makes people feel like they care. And that actually goes a long way. But thinking about, I met with somebody today, we were talking about if they're going to take on a bigger role in their organisation, which has only got 20-ish people, how do they develop their influencing skills? And there's lots of ways you can do that. Just sitting down having the conversation has made a big difference. So for small businesses, it's about kind of not being too short-sighted, putting in the time, demonstrating investment and being creative.
That's fantastic, Sandra. Now, you obviously had a very successful career in the corporate world. If we look at the other side of the coin to that, what is some of the best advice that you could give to somebody who is going up the corporate ladder or the career ladder and wanting to achieve a director level like you did in the past?
I think one of the things that helped me, I put my hand up for everything. So if ever there was a problem that needed to be fixed, I'd say, well, I'll have a go, try and fix it. And often, therefore, was sometimes working on projects nobody wanted anything to do with. But if it's genuinely a problem that's getting in the way of the business, I was kind of always the one that said, bring it on, I'll have a go and see if I can do it. And I think that earned me respect that she's not just going to choose the nice shiny projects, but she's going to just battle on and try and actually go head to head with some of the more difficult challenges. And I think I said I'd do it and then learnt the skills as quickly as I could and got on with it. And that really helped. So I think put your hand up, learn the skills as you go. Don't be shy.
That's brilliant. I understand that you took a career break to have children. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about what made you make that decision at the time. And was that the catalyst for you eventually to set up your own business?
I wouldn't say it was as thought about as that. But I did leave. So I decided to leave Starbucks because I loved my time at Starbucks, but it was very hard work. Being run by a US business meant the day was very long, and therefore I felt like I wasn't able to commit any time really to my personal life because I was just working a lot. So I decided to leave. I was on a 6-month notice period.
Okay.
I couldn't tell anybody I was leaving until literally 2 weeks from my leave date. So it was very challenging. But I worked the 6 months and then fell pregnant pretty much straight away. And then I was Group HR Director whilst I was for Clinton's whilst I was pregnant.
Okay.
And I hadn't really thought at that time whether I would go back to corporate or not. I just thought that I'd spent a lot of time focusing on my career and actually wanted to focus some time on my personal life. And so that was kind of at that point all I needed to know. Yeah. But then 4 years into then looking after my kids, I felt like I love my children very much, but my brain was turning to mush, and headhunters were phoning saying, "Are you coming back? I've been on maternity leave forever." And I think there's a choice, as I'm sure many women find. Do you go back to a corporate life and put your children in with childcare, which would have been heartbreaking for me at the time? Or do I find another way of using the skills I've developed in a very different business model? And the HR department contacted me and said, would you ever consider buying a franchise? And I said, yeah, absolutely. It literally was like a bolt out of the blue. It was like, that's a really obvious thing to do. Let's do it. And within I think 3 weeks, I'd given them a check and offer was off. That was it. I was off.
That's amazing, Sandra, because that speaks volumes to something you said a bit earlier, which is small businesses, medium-sized businesses need to be creative as to what they do to market themselves to great employees, right? Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about your business today.
So the HR department is a franchise. There's about 85, probably 90 franchisees across the country. And the business model is that we provide outsourced HR services to local SMEs, because a small business doesn't need a full-time HR person. Why would they? But if they're employing people, they need to be compliant. They need to offer the employee just as much as a massive corporate needs to offer within the first 8 weeks. So whether you've got 10,000 people or whether you've got 2, you still need to provide a contract of employment. You still need to provide a disciplinary grievance policy. You still need to check their right to work in the UK. So it's helping those small businesses be compliant to protect themselves. But also, unfortunately, employing people brings with it opportunities aplenty and challenges and drama.
Indeed.
And therefore, sometimes small business owners don't necessarily know the minefield that they're in. And so trying to make sure that our clients certainly feel like they can pick up the phone and say, this has happened, what do we do? is really important, because it's really easy within 48 hours of something happening to have made the wrong judgment call and then pay a price for it. And for a small business, it can literally break them.
Wow.
If they have a discrimination case or something on their hands because they hadn't taken action that they should have, discrimination cases are uncapped. I mean, you could be talking 50 grand. I'm not sure many small businesses could just write a check and not feel the pain for that. So it's making sure that we literally bolt on as a HR service and they can use us as and when they need to. Hopefully helps them sleep better at night.
And I'm guessing, given your background in particular, you can also help them with some of those positive conversations about growth strategies and things that they might be struggling with. So it works as a sounding board as well as for the basics of the HR building blocks of a company?
Yeah, so we know our kind of day-to-day. We have a HR advice side service where our clients can phone and they'll get their contracts or the probation period written up or whatever it is. But for many of our clients, we also do a quarterly review meeting where we look at the organisational performance. And literally, I mean, this does not need to be a big business. It could be a team of 10. It could be a team of 80. We're doing one tomorrow, which is a team of 75. But it is a look at how are we performing, where have we got opportunities for more productivity, where have we got potential, how do we keep our star performers, how do we manage those that are struggling, so that you can proactively manage those issues and prepare for growth rather than having to react when things go wrong. So it's helping a management team often take a step back and have a look at how we're going to do this to create a really good people plan.
That's fantastic. Sandra, tell us a little bit about your involvement with the local business community, a little bit about some of the events and initiatives that you've recently set up.
So we've done a number of different types of events over the last 12 months and obviously some we're trialling to see which works best. Mm-hmm. But things have included, so we have run top tips for small businesses through Umbridge Borough Council, helping businesses understand where they really need to maybe make some investments to keep them compliant and help them grow. Those have gone down really well. We've done recruitment masterclasses because that is so often such a pain point for businesses when they really struggle to recruit and it's easy to get it wrong. I'm currently working with Kingston Chambers of Commerce on a HR forum, which gets together HR professionals inside businesses, because it can often be quite a lonely role. If you're the only person in an organisation that's in some way responsible for HR, actually it's a minefield, and sometimes you just want to bounce some ideas off somebody else that's in a similar situation. So we get everyone together for free once a quarter. And also we did the Kingston Expo last week, which is a fabulous way of meeting loads of local businesses. And on Wednesday I'm speaking at the Umbridge Business Leaders Conference in Mercedes-Benz World, talking similarly about what we said earlier about agile workforces and how businesses need to be creative about how you get the best skills that you can afford to suit your business, rather than going with the traditional every job's full-time sat next to you. The world isn't like that anymore.
That's brilliant. Sandra, what are some of the main challenges facing HR that you see over the next, say, 5 years?
HR challenges, I mean, the challenges stroke opportunities. There's one is about how HR professionals get up to speed and utilise technology so that you can properly support a business. You can get a lot of data and a lot of information by using systems and software well. So that is an opportunity where we can make a big difference. How we are able to access the right skills to support business is crucial. And that is about HR people understanding where there are funding opportunities to help small businesses, about how you utilise apprenticeships, how you get return to work parents to consider you as a good employer. There's so many opportunities there. I mean, that in itself is a full-time job. So the skills, access to skills and helping small businesses access those is crucial. Technology is crucial. But also, legislation keeps changing. Staying on top of that to help protect organisations is an imperative.
What would be some tips for a small and medium-sized employer so that they can think about their internal diversity policy and how that could actually help them grow as a business?
I'm not just saying this, but literally we were talking about this the other day where we have a client. It looks like a family-run business. They're not a family, but you'd think they're a family when you walk in the door.
Wow.
It's very easy, I think, for you to subconsciously recruit people that are the same as yourself. And I don't think it's driven by a prejudice. I think it's just it's a very subconscious affinity with people that speak the same way, that look similar to you. That's maybe who you feel most comfortable with, which precludes a huge amount of talent from your organisation and can be very off-putting to potential clients. Sometimes I think small businesses don't realise it until it's pointed out, as we've had a client recently. So, I mean, I think whether it is they speak with, a company like mine or something, but get a fresh pair of eyes to look at that, or whether they've got the courage to look at the stats themselves. But when you are seeing a company from the outside and you are considering them as a potential employer or as a potential provider of services, if it's not diverse, then people will make a judgment on that, and that can be dangerous, I think, if you're not representing people of all kind of walks of life. So one is have a look at, from the outside, how would it look? Considering your own processes and policies and seeing actually we're getting in our own way. And then being able to try to maybe actively try to encourage other people to join. Understanding that might be quite difficult, actually, for those first people to come in. If they're feeling a bit out of place, then that's going to need to be supported, because otherwise they may well feel that they're not suited.
Yeah, and it's amazing how that ties back into something you said right at the beginning of the show, which is a good HR function in a business is all about the people in the business, and just making sure that the people placed in the best place possible for them to be the best they can be within that organization. I think that's the message that I leave with today from this conversation, which perhaps I for some reason didn't see HR as being that inside a business before this conversation. So massive thank you. Sandra, more than ever, mental health is something that's being widely discussed. How would you suggest businesses think about mental health as an internal issue?
I think there's a nervousness for business owners. Well, there's a nervousness and there's a slightly dismissive attitude from some. So sometimes I think business owners don't really want to talk about it or are dismissive of it as a topic, because they may themselves have never had any kind of mental health issues, or they've felt stressed but they've just got on with it. And therefore, if the employees can see that that's the case, then they clearly may not feel that comfortable about going and raising issues or support that they might need. So a challenge is always how do we help businesses not feel fearful of asking the question. It's really topical at the minute. I mean, it feels like mental health is on the news for one reason or another pretty much daily. And yet there is still a resistance maybe of small business owners to feel like it's an issue for them. I think they sometimes think that's a corporate thing, right? That's nothing to do with us, because I'm just running this carpet company. Therefore that's not for me to worry about, which is wrong. But also I think they almost don't want to open the can of worms because they don't know what they'll do with it. So they need to take it seriously just as much as any company does. They have a responsibility to create a positive working environment. And sometimes that's about making sure that the work allocated is fair and to people's skill sets, so it's not overly stressful, but also understanding that lives happen at the same time. People can't leave their life and their emotional health at the door when they check in the morning. And therefore being supportive and kind of being reasonable and allowing people the support they need, or a bit of space sometimes, is probably going to be far more beneficial to the business and obviously to the individual in the long run. So there's lots of resources available, but it's something that small business certainly can't ignore.
That's fantastic. And I wouldn't mind hearing some advice from you to our listeners who might be job seekers. So in particular, two groups. Firstly, what advice would you give to someone who's going to be leaving university soon and is just about to get into the workforce?
Goodness, I every year I go to St Peter's Catholic school in Guildford, and I talk to their school leavers about employability skills.
Okay.
Even the very basics of how do you shake someone's hand and make eye contact, which is becoming actually quite challenging because it's not something they will necessarily do until they go in for an interview. So I spend quite a bit of time with them, and I do a day's workshop with them in helping them understand how you sell yourself at interview stage, because through academia they will have been very focused on making sure they have the right grades, and that of course is very, very important. However, when you're an employer and you've got 20 CVs in front of you and the grades are much the same, even though they might be brilliant, if you're competing against those, is how do you stand out from the crowd? So one of the biggest tips I talk about is how you feel comfortable in answering the question, tell me about yourself. Because you need to think about 2 or 3 things which demonstrates why you'll have great work ethic, why you show your resilience, your strength of character, whether it's because you've got gold Duke of Edinburgh, whether it's because you've got black belt in karate. How do you stand out from the crowd? Because the CV is not enough.
That's great.
And that kind of takes self-esteem, but they've got to be able to come across as confident without appearing arrogant. And that's quite challenging. So whether it's university leavers or college leavers or just coming out of GCSEs, whatever, it's really important to think about how you're going to come across to an employer, because it's such an unusual setting for them.
Absolutely. How about to working parents who are looking to make a move into an environment that perhaps offers them flexible working?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question. We've been thinking about how we might put on workshops for return to work parents, because the recruitment industry is changing so much with technology. That it can be a challenge. If you've come from a certain kind of profession and actually you want to change that a bit, or you think you can offer your skills in a transferable way to something that isn't kind of on your job title, it's not helpful in some ways using the normal job boards, because they work like search engines. So they'll look for certain keywords. And if your CV is not full of those, you're probably not going to get the chance.
Wow.
So for return to work parents, if you're looking to change out of the industry where you've come from, to gain that flexibility, then it is all about word of mouth. It is all about networking, because then you get the chance to help join up the dots. That might not obviously be apparent if it's just a CV and a cover letter. So, really, to be honest, still, whilst job boards like Indeed and Total Jobs and things are still massively successful, if you're a return to work parent, actually you want to work locally and flexibly, the best way is to get out there and network and use social media in a way that you can join the dots up for people to say, I would be really good in your business because I've got these skills and this is how I can add value to you. And do you know what? I'm really good value for money.
That's amazing. That's really good, Sandra. I really appreciate that. Sandra, what would you say to a millennial who came up to you today and asked you about getting into HR as a profession or a career path?
And I do get asked this quite often. There's a technical route, obviously. So the CIPD is our kind of regulatory body, when there's a route in terms of being able to learn the core kind of facets of HR, if you like. So you go through your CIPD qualifications and certificates. It's kind of an obvious route for people to take, and it demonstrates a commitment to the profession. So that gets brownie points. But the most kind of important one, I suppose, is trying to get work experience. And so the more that people are able to say, to offer themselves up for a work placement or to work as an additional resource to a business, to get hands-on experience of writing contracts or dealing with disciplinaries or typing up the notes, the more you can get that type of experience, the more able you are to get your foot in the door. It's very competitive to get into HR. Because a lot of people come out of kind of social skills courses and want to try HR, and therefore it can be very competitive. And so anything you can do that demonstrates work experience, and either having done certificates or started their CIPD qualifications will really, really help. I would say get in touch with businesses and see if there's a way of being able to get work experience in the HR department over the summer or something, as a way of getting your head above the parapet.
Be proactive, right?
Always.
Excellent. Okay. As we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick-fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
So I run 2 businesses and I'm a single mum with 2 children. So I don't get much time to relax at all. But if I ever do get a chance, then city breaks.
Brilliant.
I find being in a completely different culture, with a different language, different food, different environment is the best escape. So I love my children dearly, but it's great to be able to go on a plane and fly around.
Fantastic. Who are some of the people that you admire and why?
This is going to sound really cheesy, but one of the people I admire the most is Darcy Wilson-Reimer, and he would blush if he heard me say this. But Darcy was the chief exec when I joined, shortly after I joined Starbucks, actually. We had some very difficult decisions to make when I was at Starbucks. It was going through a challenging time. And Darcy, above probably any other leader I've worked with, thought just as much about how he was going to do something as about the decision itself.
Oh, wow.
He just has such a real heart in thinking through, what is the best way I can do this? How would I want to receive this news? How would I want to be treated? And he really meant it. And it meant that we did things really well, I think. But I haven't met many leaders that compare from that perspective. That's
brilliant. What an experience to have working alongside somebody like that as well.
Yeah.
Is there a book that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
I'm an avid reader. I do spend most of my time kind of with business books than fictional books. The last fictional book I read, which I loved because it's just such a good page turner, was I Am Pilgrim.
Okay.
It is brilliant. It's very hard to put down. Business books wise, actually, I'd say that 2 kind of classics were probably fundamental for me when I was in my earlier career. So Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers mainly because I was often the only female in a otherwise male team, board, management team, whatever it was. And for some reason that made me feel quite self-conscious. And so having the confidence when I felt little and higher voiced than my counterparts, that finding that confidence was crucial. And also First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham, just because it's quite ballsy, it's go get 'em, and that spurred me on my way.
That's brilliant. Is there a movie or a TV series that you've recently watched that you could recommend to our listeners?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm at the minute in the middle of Killing Eve, which I just love.
Amazing series, by the way.
Amazing. I mean, actors are amazing in that. One of my best kind of box sets of all time is Mad Men, because it looks at the advertising industry in the 50s and 60s when a lot of the kind of political correctness was coming in and things. And I think it's extremely well shot and everything. It's beautiful, but yeah, fascinating.
Fantastic. Finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
Okay, so funnily enough, we have a website. So if you go onto the hrdept.co.uk website, there's that's the page for all the franchises around the country, so you can put in your postcode and know who your local licensee is. Prolific on LinkedIn. We do tweet and we do Facebook too, so yeah.
Fantastic. So people can check you out on those channels, and
Definitely.
Of course we'll link all of those links up on the show notes. Sandra, thank you for joining us on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure to get to know your story.
Thanks, Eric.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.